When someone says it's all connected, they're not kidding. Today we explore the connection between the Sabbath and the way we were created on Soul Zero 2. And welcome to Soul Zero 2. This is the podcast that's putting the oxygen back into the Christian life one soul at a time. And I'm so glad to be with you today. And today we discuss part 3 in the series titled Sabbath. Part 3 is about how Sabbath is connected to our creation. It has been said that when you fail to connect something on a small level, it will later affect things on a bigger level. Thus, every choice we make affects the world around us, no matter how small. So have you ever heard of the old rhyme, for want of a nail? And I think I might have shared this on another podcast before, but it bears sharing again because it shows how small things can connect the biggest things in the end. It goes like this: for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a message, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. And it's kind of funny and cute, but this is serious stuff here. This proverb has come in many flavors through the centuries, but they all say and mean the same thing basically. That when you fail to correct something on a small level, it will later affect things on a larger scale. Not unlike the butterfly effect, or what they call chaos theory, that believes that a small change at one place can result in a large difference in a later state. Adam and Eve is an example of this. When they ate the fruit, and eating the fruit was such a small thing, right? But that small thing later affected the universe. Small things can turn a powerful horse or a ship, says James 3. It says if we set bits in the horses' mouths to make them obey us, we can turn their whole bodies rather. Likewise, look at the ships. Though they are so great and are driven by rough winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the impulse of the helmsman determines. So somebody said it well when they said this, that the happiness of most people is not ruined by great catastrophes or fatal errors, but by the repetition of slowly destructive little things. And so the Sabbath is a small thing in our lives that affects everything. How is it all connected, though? The Sabbath is connected to, number one, identity. And we find that, have you heard of that movie called Citizen Kane? It was a very, very famous movie, one of my favorites, and it's considered by critics one of the best movies of all time. It's about a man's, how absolute power, corrupts absolutely, and well, let me just give you a brief synopsis of the story. In Citizen Kane, it's a tale of a man who compromises his morals in order to accumulate all the riches and power that anyone could desire. He turns into a greed-driven, self-centered, evil businessman. While towards the end of the story, while dying in a fire, Kane utters these famous words, "Rosebud." And at first you say, well, what is he talking about? But Rosebud refers to the sled that he rode as a child. He visualizes a lone, snow-speckled sled. And the sled he owned as a child was Rosebud. And at the last, he realizes his mistake. He had forgotten who he was. Cain remembered too late the simple and happy place where he had come from, and how awful his life had become now. So Sabbath reminds you that how you were created, and that in God you thrive best when you follow His prescription for your body, for your mind, and for your spirit. But also, secondly, I want to give you this, that Sabbath is also connected to how material creation was made. In other words, in the scriptures, everyone was ordered to rest, even animals, right? During the Sabbath, even you couldn't work your animals. And there's something about all creation here that takes a break, that rests, celebrating this idea of connecting with their Creator. And every 7 years, the land was to have rest so that it could recover and renew itself for future harvests. So what would God do? He would give them double the 6th year to hold them over the 7th year. I mean, it's an amazing thing when you do it God's way. So even negative events can force the land to rest. And it's interesting how, as awful as it is, how forest fires allow the land to rest. And they kind of make a way for growth, so to speak. Forest fires reduce much of fallen trees to ash, which speeds up how quickly nutrients can return to the soil. And these nutrients are used by future trees to nourish themselves and grow. In forests that have gone without fires for a long time, dry undergrowth can choke out the growth of new trees, and on a long enough timeline, this can cause serious harm to a forest if older trees die and younger trees aren't there to replace them. The balance of the forest is thrown off, and forest fires, this is where there's one positive. They clear much of this dry underbrush, giving new trees and plants an opportunity to get the necessary sunlight and room to grow. 3. The Sabbath is connected to the principle of trusting God with our needs. Sabbath rest is like a well that keeps us satisfied against all substitutes. And the idea of constantly being on. Sometimes we can believe the lie that if we stop and rest, there's going to be so much more that we have to do later and nothing's going to get done. And this makes the Sabbath a step of faith in the God who provides. In Jeremiah 2:13, God criticizes Israel when he said, "My people have committed 2 sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." And this speaks of the grueling and exhausting path we choose when we don't trust God with our needs. When we are not walking in spiritual rest, we try to substitute satisfaction in God for things that don't hold water. So Sabbath, on the other hand, places things in their right order. Things like the flesh, our emotions, our desires, overwork, chores, striving. Just keep filling the blanks in, right? And all those things are put under the lordship of Jesus as we rest in him, trusting that he will bless our time to get things done. All these things can get out of control when you're not drinking from the well of the Sabbath rest that God provided for you. Now, interestingly, the Sabbath is attached to Jesus in the New Testament as a prescription for a true rest in him. Remember Jesus' proclamation in Mark 2:28 when he said, "The Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath." So the Sabbath especially counters greed, of which Francis Morissetti calls the deadly sin, is one that affects almost everyone. Greed is inordinate love of material things and an unbalanced desire for more earthly possessions. A greedy person cherishes things more than he or she cherishes people or relationships. It's never enough. I got to have more. It's a motto of the ugly sin called greed. Morissetti goes on to tell why greed is such a deadly sin. Greed is a sign of mistrust. It is an expression of doubt that God will provide all that you need. More crimes have been committed due to greed than any other deadly sin. Greed drives people to steal, to lie, and even to kill in order to acquire wealth and worldly possessions. Greed ruins marriages, destroys friendships, and divides families, all in the selfish pursuit of gratifying one's selfish greed. Greed is the opposite of charity, generosity, and love. And there's so much more I can say about that. But so some final thoughts as to why we take a Sabbath. Number one, because it fits the way you were created. The Sabbath fits the way you were made. Rest is built into creation. Exodus 20:11 says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day and consecrated it." Have you ever taken notice of how fitting it is for you to take a Sabbath rest, just to stop everything and just, we're not talking about vacation. We're talking about one day a week. It's almost like a mini vacation in a way. That you're resting your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, and you're doing things that give you energy, and you're doing things that make you relax, and you're doing this under the acknowledgement of your Creator, which we'll talk about in the last part of the series, which is next time we're together. But you feel so renewed and recharged when you choose to stop. Not only is rest built into creation, but also here's another reason why we need a Sabbath. Resting puts you in a position to receive. What do we receive? Well, have you ever wondered why we get incredible ideas and visions and solutions when we're sleeping? In an article called Why You Are More Creative at Night, studies on sleep creativity say that everything you hear, see, taste, smell, and touch goes through the frontal lobe, is processed and sorted based on a lot of various criteria. When you sleep, however, that part of the brain shuts off, and other parts of your brain are become not restrained by the impossibility or logistics. They take over. Instead of worrying about perfecting what's impossible, your brain runs without limits. Ideas and paths of thinking that might otherwise be stopped in the calculating part of your brain. However, when we're hurried and anxious or greedy, we're not in the position to receive, but it's the very opposite happens. Our creativity goes down. But I want to give you this, just one last thing. Why a Sabbath? Because there is a blessing attached to it, to the Sabbath. There is no blessing in the scriptures promised to work without rest. The more we do without a Sabbath, the less consecrated and the less blessed our efforts become. The more we rest after our work is done, the more blessed our time and efforts are, and the more divine provision is available. So are there areas of your life that are out of control? Have greed, lust, or desires gained a foothold in your heart, forcing you into a life of ceaseless striving and exhaustion? If so, make the choice today to work out with God 1 day out of 7 when you will choose to stop and rest, reflect, and renew. So if you like this podcast, and if it's been a blessing to you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this podcast with others. Engage with us via these various channels as we work to grow our channel. And I want to thank you and God bless you for being with us. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, take care of yourself.